Happy Wednesday. Charlotte has decided that she's going to crawl down and hang out right here, so I have a feeling she's not going to stay there very long, but you never know, as Fudge says it, right? Who can explain it? Who can tell you why? We left off yesterday with the Howies being parked in a van around the corner and Dad and Fudge going out to see what was going to happen. I bet you're very curious, so I don't want to hold off too long with it. Oh, I also got my Wonder Woman shirt on. Wonder Woman, right? Why not? A little superhero power for this day. I have a feeling that somebody might need a superhero or somebody to save the day. An hour later, the Howies were sound asleep on our living room floor. Up with the sun, asleep with the moon, Cousin Howie said. You'll hardly know we're here. I'll know, I thought. And just like that, they climbed into their sleeping bags and closed their eyes. Cousin Howie snored softly. Lined up next to him were Eudora, then Minnie, followed by the natural beauties. They slept flat on their backs, like a row of hot dogs in their rolls. All that was missing was the mustard and the relish. Turtle didn't get it. He kept sniffing them. He even tried licking Eudora's face, and since no toes were available, but still, they didn't wake up. Mom said I had to get Turtle into my room and fast, but I couldn't lure him past the Howies. Psst, I whispered, crawling around the living room on all floors, holding out a wedge of cheese. Come here, boy. But he didn't even look at me. Mom motioned for me to come into the kitchen. She was laying out plates, bowls, and silverware. Would you count out 9 juice glasses, Peter? Are we having a midnight supper or what? It's for tomorrow morning's breakfast, Mom asked. I checked the cupboard, but I hate to break it to you, Mom, but we don't have 9 juice glasses. How about 4? I'll ask your dad to pick up some paper cups. Where is Dad, anyway? At the grocery store. We've got 5 extra mouths to feed in the morning. And when the phone rang, Mom grabbed it on the first ring. I'll take it in my bedroom so we don't wake our guests. The second Mom left the kitchen, Fudge tore out of his room in his pajamas and started jumping over the sleeping Howies, making Turtle bark. Still, they didn't stir. They didn't wake up. Maybe they're dead, Fudge whispered to me. They're not dead. How do you know? Because they're breathing. Be quiet. You can hear them. Fudge listened, and then he said, it's better to breathe. Right, Pete? Yeah, it's definitely better to breathe. Remember when I wanted to be a bird breather when I grew up? That was a bird breeder, I reminded him. Oh, right, a bird breeder. He watched the Howies for a minute, and then he looked up at me. This is fun, right, Pete? No, I told him. It's not fun. He followed me into the kitchen. How come? How come? I repeated. I'll give you 5 reasons why. But Pete, Grandma says the more the merrier. Grandma's full of sayings. You don't have to believe all of them. But I do. He dragged a chair over to the counter, climbed up, opened the snack cupboard, and pulled out, you guessed it, a pack of rice cakes. It's like a giant sleepover, isn't it? I could think of plenty of other words besides sleepover to describe the situation, but none of them were appropriate to say in front of him. When Mom came back to the kitchen and found Fudge stuffing his face, she scooped him up and carried him back into his room, where he started singing. The moon belongs to everyone. The best things in life cost money. The stars belong to everyone. They're all so bright and funny. Money, money, money. Funny, funny, funny. Bunny, bunny, bunny. Honey, honey, honey. A minute later, Turtle was howling. He loves to sing along with Fudge. I was glad Uncle Feather was still on strike. Remember that? A trio would have been more than I could take that night. If I'd gone to bed then, I'd probably have been, okay, annoyed, but okay. I mean, suppose The Simpsons were on TV tonight and I wanted to watch it. Our only TV is in the living room. And then I started thinking, wait a minute. Suppose my science teacher told us to watch a show on the Disney Channel and we were going to discuss it tomorrow in class. She did that once, but this time I wouldn't be able to answer her questions. And my teacher would say, you should have told me you don't have a TV, Peter. And then Sheila Tubman's hand would have shot up. And she would have said, I happen to know the Hatchers have a TV, Miss DeFeo, she'd blab. It's in their living room. Then I'd have to explain that I couldn't watch because our living room had been turned into a sleepaway camp. What camp is that, Miss DeFeo would ask, and I'd have to think fast to come up with a name like, I don't know, Camp Howie Wowie, I'd tell her, and then everyone would laugh. She's still hanging out there. The longer I thought about it, the more worked up I got. My heart started beating faster, my mouth felt dried out, and the palms of my hands were getting clammy. Still, I couldn't tear myself away from the sleeping Howies. It was like one of those bad dreams where you want to run, but you can't. It was like my feet were glued to the floor, and I could feel the anger boiling up inside of me. Any second it would burst, and it would come pouring out like lava from a volcano. Just go to bed, I kept telling myself, but my feet refused to listen to my brain. Finally, I forced myself to break away. I tore behind the hall to the bathroom, shut the door behind me, and leaned against it. But when I saw 5 toothbrushes lined up in a row, the 5 towels hanging from the towel bar, and the 5 hairbrushes, not to mention the giant economy-sized bottle of vitamins, I just lost it. I mean, totally. I grabbed the towels and threw them on the floor, one after the other, and then I trampled them like I was trying to kill some gigantic roach. Ah! This strangled sound came from deep inside of me as I swept their hairbrushes off the counter. I kicked at them as if they were poisonous snakes. Ah! I turned into a raving lunatic. No, even worse. I turned into my brother at the shoe store. Then I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My face was red. My eyes were wild. I looked like some demented guy in a scary movie. In the back of my mind, I heard Cousin Howie asking, "What do we do when we get carried away?" And the natural beauty's answering, "We stop and count to 10. And if that doesn't work, we count to 10 again." So I started to count. When I got to 10, I took a deep breath and then started all over again. In the mirror, I saw my facial expression return to normal. I couldn't believe I'd used Cousin Howie's method to control my anger, or that it actually worked. But it did. I shook out the 5 towels and hung them up again. Probably no one would even notice that they were dark, since they were dark gray. There are other ways to handle this situation, I told myself as I lined up their hairbrushes. I marched down the hall to Mom and Dad's room and pushed open the door without even knocking. "How do we know these people are who they say they are?" I said. Mom was stretched out on her bed, her hands over her eyes. "What?" "The Howies. They could be anybody. A week ago, we didn't even know they existed, and now they're sleeping on our living room floor." "But they have the Hatcher jaw, don't they?" Mom said. "I don't see a Hatcher jaw," I said. "Do you?" "Well, I thought I did." Mom looked worried for a second, and then she shook her head and waved her hand. "This is silly. Of course they're your dad's cousins. Hey, it's okay with me if you want 5 strangers sleeping on our living room floor." "They're not strangers, honey," Mom said. "They're family." No one but Cousin Howie ever called Dad Tubby. She put her arm around my shoulder. "You should try to get some sleep." "I'd like to know just one thing, Mom." "What's that?" "Why you and Dad had to invite them to stay here. We don't have room for 2 extra people, let alone 5. They more or less invited themselves." We were quiet for a minute, and then Mom said, "This is really important to your dad. So let's just make the best of it, okay?" "Important how?" Mom said when Dad was a little boy, his mother got very sick. "She did?" Mom nodded. Cousin Howie's parents were wonderful. Dad spent the whole summer with them, and for a while he and Cousin Howie were as close as, well, you and Jimmy. How come I never heard this story before? I guess Dad doesn't like to talk much about the time in his life. It was hard on him. Did his mother get better? She did. For a while. I wish Dad would tell me these things. He doesn't want to upset you. Yeah, but how am I supposed to understand anything if we don't talk about it? Maybe someday he will, Mom said. By then it'll be too late. I hope not. She reached out and ruffled my hair. I understand that having 5 almost strangers sleeping on the living room floor doesn't give you or any of us much privacy, but it's just for a night, 2 nights at the most. We'll get through it. Then she leaned over and kissed me. Sometimes I don't let her, but this time I did. I kept hearing Mom's voice. It's just for a night, 2 nights at the most. When I woke up the next morning, the Howies were already in the kitchen making themselves right at home. Eudora at the stove scrambling eggs, Howie tending the toaster. Minnie was seated on the counter next to the sink breaking eggshells and sticking them to his nose and forehead. This kid is as weird as Fudge, I thought. The natural beauties were at the table gobbling Dad's cereal, and Fudge sat at his usual place counting out his Cheerios. Mom stood by, dressed in her whites are her scrubs, remember, ready to go to work. She didn't look happy. I happen to know that Mom doesn't like other people taking over her kitchen. She's okay with Grandma cooking here, but that's her limit. Our kitchen isn't exactly roomy either. We have a small table shoved up against the wall. You can reach the stove from the table, which is sometimes convenient, but we eat most of our meals in the dining alcove. I poured myself a glass of orange juice and took the last chair at the table. Good morning, Peter, Eudora said. We've been talking about you. Me? What were they saying about me? We were just saying that maybe you could take Flora and Fauna to school with you today. What? I can't have heard that right. I must have water in my ears from my shower. They'd like to see a New York City school, Eudora continued. This required quick thinking. My school doesn't allow visitors, I said, hoping Mom would help me out with this one. That's right, Mom told Eudora. They won't allow anyone in who hasn't been previously registered. Schools have very strict policies in New York. And tight security. I threw that in just to make sure that they got it. Besides, I said to the natural beauties, who were filling their bowls with a second helping of Dad's cereals, I thought you were homeschooled. We are, Flora began, but that doesn't mean we don't visit schools, Fauna said. Besides, we've been studying foreign cultures, Flora said. This is New York, I told him. It's not a foreign culture. It is to us, Fauna hiccuped. Sorry, it's the orange juice. She's used to fresh squeeze, Flora said. Mom rolled her eyes and poured herself a second cup of coffee. I was trying to figure out if there's a pattern to the way that the natural beauties speak. Does Flora start every time or only sometimes? And is Fauna the one who always finishes? So far, I haven't been able to come up with anything clear, and trying to figure out who was saying what was making me tired, even though my day had hardly even begun. Cousin Howie set plates of eggs and toast in front of each of the natural beauties. That's when he noticed Dad's cereal box and Flora and Fauna's empty bowls. What have you girls been eating? He asked, grabbing the box from the table. It was one of those cereals that promises to keep adults young and fit and regular. Cousin Howie began to read aloud from the list of ingredients on the side of the box. Artificial sweeteners? Artificial flavors? He looked at the girls. Repeat after me. I know better than to poison my body with unnatural ingredients. They repeated it. One more time, Cousin Howie said. We know better than to poison our bodies with unnatural ingredients. That's better, he said. Now eat your eggs.